So thank you again, everyone, for coming this week. So today we're going to be talking about the 5 skandhas, or the 5 aggregates. This is how we usually translate it into English. This is the Buddha's teaching on what makes us us, what makes a person. This can seem a little bit dry, but it's really important to understand. This is essentially impermanence applied to us, to what we think of as our being. This is also part of a Dharma talk that I gave. It's a section from a Dharma talk that I gave, maybe last summer or at some point. And so Nyat Bak Wak did the translation for it into Vietnamese. So he's going to email it to me, and then I'll email it to all of you. And then you'll have a copy of it in Vietnamese as well. So the 5 skandhas are form, sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness. There are different ways that you'll see these translated. These are the translations that I prefer. Sometimes you see sensation translated as feeling, for example. But then sometimes people get confused with volition when we use the term feeling. So these are the translations that I prefer. So Sanskrit, or skandha, comes from Sanskrit, and as I said, it means heap or aggregate. So these are parts. Basically, like all things, we are also made up of parts. I point to this bench a lot, or the temple. The temple is made up of parts, doors and plaster and drywall and wood and things, right? We are also made up of parts. But we have this false perception that we are solid and fixed beings. So this is a skillful perception to have. That's what these 5 skandhas are. They are a skillful perception or a tool that we can use to cultivate the understanding that we're not these singular, fixed, unchanging beings. Just like everything else, we come together due to various causes and conditions. And these are the parts that come together. But when we die, well, let's look at the first one here, form. Form is basically the body. So when we die, we let go of the body, right? We let go of most of this when we die. So we come together because of various causes and conditions, and when the causes and conditions for us to continue leaving end, we come apart. These parts come apart. So then that begs the question, what passes from lifetime to lifetime? It's essentially consciousness. Specifically, we talk about something called the alaya consciousness. In English, we call this the storehouse consciousness. It's like a big storeroom. When I was studying in Nepal, the Khenpo, the Tibetan professor Lama who was teaching the class, said, think of it like your computer memory, but it's infinite. There's no limit. This is the alaya consciousness. And what is stored there is the seeds of our karma. I think you've heard me, some of you who've been here before have heard me talk about how everything we think, say, and do, it leaves an impression in the mind. It imprints upon the mind. So if we keep indulging anger, for example, we're imprinting a lot of the tendency for anger in the mind, and then that comes up again later, right? Along with the consequences of our actions. So all of this is imprinting in the mind, and this is what passes from lifetime to lifetime. But the rest of this drops away. So form is basically the body. The body itself is made up of different parts. We've got bones, skin, muscle, blood, and other kinds, hair, skin, other kinds of organs and tissues in the body. So my original ordination master for when I became a novice, he was a Tibetan teacher, and he liked to use the example of the hand. So if you take your hand apart and you put the skin here and the fingernails in another bowl, I know this is really gross, and then the blood in a bowl and the muscle and the tendons and everything, if you separate all of these things, well then where is your hand? The hand is just a label that we use for something that is a collection of parts. It's the same thing with the whole body. It's the same thing with everything. We talked about something interesting in one of my classes, though, recently, that the Buddha, when he was talking about impermanence, he wasn't really focused on things, external things, like the body and this bench in the temple. He was really, again, talking about our perception. That's the focus of the Buddha's teaching. It's not on the physical world, it's on our perception. Everything in the Dharma ultimately comes back to our perception. So the Buddha talked about these things to help us change our perception so that we could let go of ignorance and therefore overcome suffering. So understanding this in relation to form, just the impermanence of form, will help us let go of our attachment to our body. My parents were present, apparently, when my mother's father passed away. This is a number of years ago. He and my grandmother were older, a little bit older, I think in their 40s when they had my mother. So he was in his early 90s when he passed away a number of years ago. And my father said that he was there when my grandfather took his last breaths, and he was saying, "I don't want to go, I'm not ready, I'm not ready." It's this clinging. A lot of the karma that pulls us into existence is this clinging to existence itself, clinging to having a body. That leaves an incredible impression upon the mind. That's a big piece of what forces us into another cycle, on another round on the cycle of birth, old age, sickness, and death. An existence that the Buddha said, and that we can see for ourselves, is pervaded by dissatisfaction and suffering. So all of this is about changing our perceptions. So this is essentially form. So then if we take apart the body, where is the body? It's just a collection of parts. Now the remaining aggregates, they all deal with aspects of the mind, elements of what we call the mind. And usually we put consciousness at the end. I've actually put it here in the beginning because consciousness is the ground on which the rest of the mind is built. So consciousness, as I point out here, it isn't about intellectual thought when we're talking about consciousness in the Buddhist context. Consciousness is, it's the ground of awareness upon which the rest of our mind, the rest of our intelligence, our thoughts and feelings are built. So I use the example in here, we can think of consciousness as like a room, an empty room filled with light. Does that image make sense to you, or does it give you some taste of what I'm talking about? Maybe? I see some nods and some confused looks. Yeah, it's a confusing topic. It's a confusing topic. So this empty room filled with light, it has all kinds of potential. There's this potential for more. So then the rest of the aggregates are this more. Or it's the foundation of a building. You can't have the windows and walls and things unless you have the foundation first. So consciousness is like the foundation. So then we also talk here about the sense consciousnesses. This is traditional Buddhist psychology. It's a little confusing. So we have the five senses, right? Sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. So according to Buddhist psychology, if I close, when I'm looking at something, like I'm looking at the computer right now, the sight consciousness arises. But if I close my eyes, the visual consciousness isn't present. It's gone. So the consciousnesses, and here we're using consciousness a little bit differently, they only arise when they meet their object. If I completely block off sound to my ears, I have no hearing consciousness. So these are also temporary. They arise and they go away. They arise and they go away. So then you might ask, well, if I'm dreaming, I'm seeing things in my dreams. Isn't that the visual consciousness? No, we say there's a sixth consciousness, the mind consciousness. And so the mind consciousness, its objects are ideas and visual images when we have our eyes closed, memories, that kind of thing. Okay, so this is a bit of an aside, but you can see again the impermanence here. They arise and they go away. They arise and they go away. That's the important point there. So then sensation refers to sensing an object as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So let me think of an example. Oh, the image that's popping into my head is you go to a haunted house, or we had Halloween parties when we were kids, and someone would make pasta, and they would cover it, and you'd put your hand in, and then somebody would say, oh, that's somebody's guts, and then you put your hand in another bowl, and it's grapes, but somebody would say, that's eyeballs. You probably didn't do that in Vietnam, did you? No, I don't think so. Okay. So that's what I'm thinking of when, touching things. But sensation isn't just touching, it's also seeing something. We see something and we say, oh, that's beautiful. Or we say, ooh, that's ugly. Or we look at something and we go, eh. We don't really have a feeling either way, okay? That's sensation. It's this sort of instinctual level of response. And then there's perception. Perception, it tells us what it is. So when I reach my hand into that bowl of pasta and somebody tells me it's guts, well, I feel it and I figure it. I know it's not guts, right? So I feel it and I'm like, oh, okay, it's probably pasta. The eyeballs are actually grapes. When I see a house, I know it's a house. When I see a car, I know it's a car. Yes? I'm sorry, I didn't hear? I'm sorry, I'm not catching what you're saying. Uh-huh. Vanish. Well, no, what I was saying is that the sense consciousnesses for sight and hearing and smell and taste and touch, they come and they go, so they vanish. They vanish. But then there's this ground of consciousness that we also talk about. That's what I was talking about when I said it's the foundation, or like the empty room filled with light. That we'll say for now that continues. I'm oversimplifying. But we'll say for now that continues. That doesn't really vanish. Okay?